So let me talk a little bit about standards-based grading, the way that I do it in my class. Um, and so first off, this is the beginning of the packet. It's several pages that the kids get. And anyways, at the beginning of each packet on the front page, we have the title of the unit, CVPM, and then we have these nine different these or not necessarily nine, just these different components that I have highlighted are really important that the student needs to be able to do. So for instance, component one says students will determine the average velocity of an object by using the slope of a position versus time graph. So we have that as a component. And as you can see, there are nine different components here. And the way that I grade is a version of standards-based grading. And so if you notice, this component is called S.P.2.1, and you got P.2.2, 2.3, 2.4, so on and so forth, all the way to 2.9. So this is how I use standards-based grading in my classroom. First off, I have three categories broken down by percentage. So I'll start over here on the left. I have daily work, which comprises of 20% of the overall grade. I have quizzes, which comprise of 20% of the overall grade. And then you have tests, which is 60% of the overall grade. So here's how I go about grading. So as the unit progresses, and as we go through things in class, they will learn these nine different components, usually one by one, but sometimes two can happen in a day. It kind of depends on the day. But gradually we'll uncover and learn about these components that I have deemed important for the student to know. Once we have done those and had time to practice with them, then they will be given a very short quiz. That quiz is usually one question, one or two questions that will ask them basically to demonstrate knowledge of that component. So for instance, if I'm assessing component 2.1, then I will be assessing their ability to specifically determine the average velocity of an object by using the slope of a position versus time graph. So it'll just be one or two questions. They'll do it, they'll turn it in. Let's say they do great. Then I grade that out of 2 points. So let's say they get 100% on that. Boom, got it. And so then, as we go, we'll see, okay, well, 2.2, he demonstrated mastery of that, so got 2, and then maybe 2.3, he didn't do very well. So 0, which I'll come back and talk about in just a second. 2.4 didn't do so well, maybe a 1, and then 2.5 did well. 2.6, maybe a 1.5, 2.7, 2, 2, and 2. There we go. So this is where we're sitting right now. So basically, when I see a 2 on there, what that means is they demonstrated mastery in that specific component. However, if I see a 0, that means they really did not understand that component whatsoever. And so here's how I typically do that. I encourage kids to re-quiz. And a re-quiz is just simply, they come in, they talk about and relearn what was missed in class, or maybe we discuss it in class. And then outside of class, either during seminar or before school, they come in and just take that another quiz, which is very similar to the first one, and then I grade it just as if they'd never taken it before. So in other words, let's say this person came in, he really didn't like that 0, and he wanted to demonstrate mastery. So he relearns it, comes in before school, I grade it, he's got it. He gets 100%. So I, in the grade book, will change that from a 0 to a 2, just like that. And that's it. And if he wanted to retest on any of them, he could. So if this one he wanted to retest, he could retest on this one as well. Okay, that's the quizzes. Then you have daily work. Daily work are questions, and usually some kind of worksheet questions. Also, I grade what they do in class at the end of each unit, which is usually pretty easy points as long as you participate in class. But the homework I do want to talk about real quick. Like for instance, this was a sample problem. Usually we'll discuss worksheets in class, but there will be like a question that I want them to try on their home. So then let's say we got on worksheet 2.1, there's question 8, and I'm like, okay, do question 8, bring it back tomorrow. It is imperative that they do it that night, and I'm going to check for it at the beginning of class the very next day. The reason I do that is because we discussed that at the very beginning of class. And so if they have not done it, then they're not ready to participate in that discussion. So literally all I'm grading on that, when I ask them to do 1 or 2 questions, I'm grading their ability to actually do it before class, not during class or anything like that. So if they do not have it done, then I put a 0. So that 0 would mean they did not get it done when I ask. If they get something like a 2, then all that means is they didn't do anything wrong. They didn't get concepts wrong or anything. That just means they did half of the assignment. So this was out of 4, so they did half of question 7. And then if they got a 2 out of 2, then that would mean they did the whole thing. They got it done. So basically, homework, daily work is graded on completion and participation. That's it. And the unit summary varies in points, but basically, it's just an assignment that I see if they do or not. If they do it, they get a 5. Okay, so that is the other 20%. Now let's talk about the big portion, which is a test. So notice that up here you have all 9 components, and then down here you have all 9 components again. So however many components will dictate how many quizzes and tests there are. The test is somewhat confusing. I give one paper test, either a paper test slash with a lab test, but sometimes it's just a paper test. And that paper test will be, 20 questions. And what I try to do on those 20 questions, 25, 30 questions, is I try to give 2 or 3 questions that address each of the components above. And then what I do is I take those questions all of the questions that dealt with 2.1, and I score that out of 100 points. And then I take all the questions that dealt with component P.2.2, score that out of 100 points. And then I go down the line and score them like that. So it's one test that I give 9 different grades to. And so when they do that, let's say they did really well on this component, they got 100, then they got maybe a 90 on that one, 80. Oh, they didn't do so hot on that one. 2.5, they got really good. And maybe 2.6, they just didn't understand the questions, got a 0 on. Then we got maybe a 50 here, 75, 90, like that. Okay? So this is basically how I grade. Now, I do want to point this out because there has been some confusion about this. A lot of people look at those components, those test components, and are like, oh my goodness, that is worth so much of the grade because you have 900 points down here and then you have less than 50 points from the other 2 components. Don't get that confused. It's a weighted based system. So if you look over here, I thought I'd demonstrate this. Let's say this person really did poorly on the test and got several zeros, because I think this will demonstrate this a little bit more. If you look over here on the right, this was completely non-weighted grades. In other words, you take all the total of those points divided by the total of the points possible, you're going to get a 43% based on what it is now. However, I have this weighted so that these points right here are worth 20%, these points are worth 20%, and then these red points down here are worth 60%. And when you do that, it significantly helps your grade. So do not think of these total points as meaning anything. All they mean is a convenient way for me to put it in PowerSchool. That's it. So this person would be sitting at the end of the unit at a 56.2%. So now let's say this is their final grade then on this, and they're like, oh man. And you as a parent are thinking, oh man, I am not happy with those grades. So here's how you can fix that. They can retest on this. So just like I talked about requizzing, if they didn't like grades up here, they can also do the same thing on the red guys down here. So let's say 2.1, man, they got a 0 on. They're thinking, I got to get this better. So what they do is they come in either during seminar or before school. We talk about issues. We reteach what we need to. And then they take a 1 or 2 question test on that specific component. So 2.1 dealing with average velocity from a position versus time graph. So they demonstrate knowledge of that. They answer those 2 questions, 1 or 2 questions. They get 100% on it. So do I come in here and enter 100%? Not quite, because I want to reward people that came ready for the test. And so what I would do is I'd give them half the points back. And so instead of a 0, I'd give them a 50. So notice on the grade in the purple over there on the right, when I enter this, it just basically rose at 3 percentage points. And they're like, man, that's still not very good. So what they can do is, once they've demonstrated knowledge, theoretically they should know it. And so then they could come in during seminar or before school again, and they can retest it again. And if they do that, then it goes up to or half the points back, a 75. And notice it just rose at 2%. And then they could do that again if they wanted to, and they could do 88, so on and so forth. And then they could come in and do it again if they really wanted to. Half of 12 is 6, so that'd be a 94. So the bottom line is this: you can get the grade in this class that you want to get. You just have to be willing to put in the grade. Literally, I just showed you how if you bomb the test, you can take a 0 and turn it into an A by just simply retesting. And you can do that with all the components. It may take time, depending on how poorly you did on the test, but you certainly can do it. Anyways, I wanted to make this video to clarify some of the grading in my classroom. And if you have any questions, please let me know, and I'd be happy to help.